I want to start with something that, pretty much every single piece of content about encryption gets completely wrong because I feel like it sets up this false sense of security that is honestly way more dangerous than just knowing nothing at all. When people talk about encrypted devices like your phone passcode or the password you use to lock your computer hard drive, the framing is always super binary. Either the encryption works and nobody can get in, or it gets hacked and everything is exposed. But that binary is not how this actually plays out in the real world. The threat to your local encryption is not mathematical. Nobody is sitting in a basement cracking military grade cryptography. The threat is literally just the law, and it has been building for years in a way that most people have just completely ignored. A few years ago, lawmakers tried to push this massive federal bill called the Lawful Access to Encrypted Data Act. It did not pass, but the debate it started has literally never gone away, and the government is still actively updating its research on how to force this to happen as recently as this year. Researchers called that original bill a full frontal nuclear assault on encryption, and tech companies said it would pretty much outlaw the most secure products in the country. And the core demand behind it, that technology companies must build a mechanism for law enforcement to bypass your local passwords, is the exact same demand that keeps getting pushed in almost every session of Congress. The bill died, but the appetite for it did not. And understanding why this keeps coming back and what it would actually mean for your physical hardware if it ever passed is what we are going to get into today. So here is the basic mechanic of what is actually happening. Because I think most people hear the word backdoor and picture something super technical and abstract, but the reality is much simpler and honestly way more unsettling. Right now, if federal agents seize your phone and want to read what is on it, the company that made the phone genuinely cannot help them, and it is not because they are just being uncooperative. It is because they physically do not hold a copy of your encryption key. The key sits locally on your device. When you set a passcode, the phone uses that passcode to generate a completely unique lock that the company servers never even see. Which means when an agent shows up with a court order demanding they unlock the phone, the company's honest answer is that they are mathematically unable to comply. And every single proposal that lawmakers keep pushing exists entirely to make that specific answer illegal. The core requirement is that any company selling devices above a certain massive scale must maintain the technical capability to decrypt your data whenever they are handed a court order. And in practice, the only way to actually do that is to hold a key. Either the company holds a master key that can unlock any device, or they have to build a mechanism, what the government calls a front door and what everyone else calls a back door, that allows them to crack the phone on demand. The legal framing calls these assistance capability directives, but the technical reality is that the exact moment that capability exists, your passcode is no longer the only key to your own device. And here's the part that literally every security researcher agrees on. There is simply no such thing as a backdoor that only the good guys can use. And this is the part I kept coming back to when I was looking through the history of this whole debate, because it is the exact argument that has successfully killed every version of this law so far, and it is the exact argument that politicians keep ignoring every time they introduce a new one. A master decryption key, by definition, is the single most valuable target on the entire planet for any adversary who wants access to American hardware, like foreign intelligence agencies, criminal organizations, or just rogue employees. The moment that capability is engineered into the hardware or the operating system, it completely stops mattering that it was built for legitimate law enforcement use. It just becomes a vulnerability. And vulnerabilities always get found. And we know this from documented history, not just speculation. Back in 2010, major tech companies were compromised by an operation called Aurora, which exploited a backdoor that had been built into the system specifically to comply with United States wiretap laws. The backdoor that was built for law enforcement was the exact same mechanism that a foreign intelligence operation used to get inside. This is not even a theoretical risk. It has literally already happened. The government's response to this has pretty much always been some variation of, we just need smarter engineers to build a backdoor that only works for us. And the consistent response from the actual mathematicians and engineers building these systems is that this is physically impossible. You cannot build a lock that only opens for authorized locksmiths. Once the lock exists, it can be picked. The government's own research literally admits that nobody has ever demonstrated how to create a door that only opens in lawful circumstances. But the debate continues anyway, because the legislative push is not driven by engineering reality. It is driven by the genuine frustration of investigators who just cannot access evidence. Now, to be completely fair here, I think most privacy content on this topic presents the law enforcement argument as purely cynical, and I honestly do not think that is accurate or even useful to understanding the threat. The cases that get cited to justify these laws are not just made up. There are massive organized crime investigations where encrypted communications prevented investigators from identifying suspects even when they had a legal wiretap. There are real terrorism and exploitation cases where investigators believe critical evidence was permanently locked on a device that nobody could open. Those are real investigations involving real victims, and the agents working them are not wrong when they say encryption makes their jobs way harder. But the argument from the other side is not that those cases do not matter. The argument is that the proposed solution creates a vulnerability so massive and so universal that it puts literally everyone else at far greater risk than the current situation does. Because encryption is the exact same technology that secures hospital networks, the power grid infrastructure, and the entire banking system. A mandated backdoor does not just create a vulnerability in the consumer devices of suspected criminals. It creates a massive vulnerability across every single system that relies on the same underlying cryptographic standards. Digital rights groups have pointed out that weakening encryption or installing backdoors will just make everyone less safe, not more. And that is the actual stakes of this entire debate. It is not about your private photos versus law enforcement convenience. It is about civilian infrastructure security versus a legal framework built on the assumption that mathematically impossible things can just be engineered into existence. And every time a new version of this law gets pushed, that exact same argument has to be made all over again from scratch. So let's pull back and look at what this actually means for the device you're holding right now, because I think it is really important to separate what is currently happening from what could happen, so you do not just get completely overwhelmed. Right now, as of today, your locally encrypted device is still protected. That massive federal law did not pass, and no equivalent has taken its place yet. The tech companies still do not hold your encryption key, and they have literally gone to court multiple times to defend that position. But the thing you need to pay attention to is the trajectory, not just the current state. The lawful access argument has very influential sponsors, and it gains genuine political momentum every single time a high-profile criminal case involves an encrypted phone. The bills that died in the past will absolutely not be the last versions of this that get introduced. And while everyone is fighting over device encryption, you have to realize that the legal environment for third-party data is already terrible. Like the data your apps collect, the behavioral tracking from your smart devices, the location data sold by massive data brokers. None of that has the same strict encryption protections as your local hard drive, and law enforcement already has extensive legal access to it. Which means the practical privacy picture is not just about whether your passcode holds up against the government. It is about how much of your life exists in places that are already completely wide open. The most durable things you can do are not just downloading a new app, They are architectural changes to how you live digitally, like keeping sensitive files physically on your local device rather than relying on cloud storage, because local files fall under device encryption rather than third-party server access. And understanding which of your devices are operated by companies that are forced to comply with these laws matters a lot for evaluating what your actual threat model is. None of this is about assuming the worst case has already happened. It is just about not being caught off guard when the laws eventually change.